A Settlers Catan is a game, right? That one.
Yes,
Yeah.
Settlers Catan is a game.
Yes,
It's
I've
very
played. I'm
popular.
sure I've played that. So I have certainly played board games. I mean, but I wasn't aware of a Hanseatic board game, which I feel like is. I'm like, what am I doing? This is my job. I should know, right?
Well, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce you to it because, yeah, that's fantastic. Because not only is there a board game out there that's on the theme of the Hanseatic League,
Hmm.
in my opinion, it's one of the best modern strategy board games there is.
I've
So,
been really missing out.
yes, and you're really in for a treat.
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Hilda, thank you for joining me this morning to talk about the board game Hansa Teutonica. Um, you are in Bergen in Norway, and you work in a Hansa museum. So my first question is, why is there a Hansa museum in Bergen in Norway?
Hmm. Well, that's a very good question. I think maybe many people wonder that. Why Bergen specifically? Why not Oslo, which is our current capital? But actually, Bergen used to be the capital of Norway, and it was the biggest city in Scandinavia all the way up until 1820. And all of that really has to do with the trade relations with the Hanseatic merchants, the Hanseatic League, because they set up a trading office in the city of Bergen that was here for 400 years. And they even came before then to do trade as well. So, because of that, and because Bergen is such a good port city, it really had a great deal of importance both to the Hanseatic League and to Norway at that point in time. So, we're talking Middle Ages here, so 13 to 1700s, the office was here.
Okay, and in Bergen, where you are, the museum, there are some buildings, aren't there, from the Hanseatic time, and you even have some like meeting rooms.
Yes, exactly. So Bergen is actually on the UNESCO World Heritage List because we have an area called Brygge. Brygge just means wharf in Norwegian, so it's a very simple descriptive name. But in the Bryggen area, we have these merchants' houses from the Hanseatic period. So they would be from early 1700s, simply because they are made out of wood, and the houses from before then were sadly destroyed in a big city fire. But we still have Hanseatic housing, and it is the only place in the world where you can see a Hanseatic quarter made out of wood like this. You cannot see it anywhere else.
In a board game, uh,
Hmm.
Hansa Teutonica, um, the it's got three game boards. The first board goes from starts from Lubeck and then goes west to Arnhem, and
Hmm.
then the second board that came out goes from Lubeck again, but heads east. It's called the East Expansion.
Hmm.
So, so Lubeck's sort of in the middle of the two boards. Um, just wondering, does that make sense?
Yes, I would say that totally makes sense. If you look at a map and you look at where Lubeck is located, it really has a very central position where it has the opportunity to connect to the sea, both to the west and to the east. And of course, you can also do land routes going east, east, west, south, and you can go north by sea as well. So you have a lot of possible connections for trade. And really, I mean, we wouldn't say the Hanseatic League had a capital per se because they weren't a state, but at most they had maybe 200 member cities, and Lubeck really was one of the most important cities.
Was there an established trade route between Lubeck and Bergen?
Yes, in fact, Lubeck was the city that had the agreement for the office, the sort of permanent trading post of Hanseatic merchants in Bergen. So if you were to look at the coat of arms of the Hanseatic office, specifically here, you would actually find that half of it is the two-headed black eagle, which is the symbol of Lubeck. So they really had a strong connection with Bergen. So you would call it, in both German and Norwegian, actually a kontor.
So there was an established trade route between Lubeck and London.
Mm.
In London, the contour was called the Steel Yard,
Mm.
which I think comes from the on the cloth that they traded. They used to use a seal, a leaden seal apparently, and it
Hmm.
was metal on there, and that's where it got the name Steel Yard.
Mm.
Possibly, this is possibly true that because the English, called the Germans the Hanseatic League, they called them the Easterlings.
Mm.
This Easterling, that could be the source of our currency. Its name, sterling, is from Easterling. In the board game Hansa Teutonica,
Mm.
credit income, it's called, is really
Mm.
important, and you need to sort of develop your income and manage it well. And that
Mm.
was something that was important for the Hanseatic League, wasn't it? It was quite innovative with credit.
Where we know banking was invented in Italy, but we do believe that credit and bookkeeping in a large degree was something invented by the Hanseatic merchants or certainly improved upon by them. So we know, for instance, that there was a English king in the 1200s that had his crown jewels as collateral with the Hanseatic merchants because he needed money for a war. And we also know that in Norway, we spoke about the main product being the stockfish, right? But the thing about fish, it is a natural resource. You're sort of at the mercy of nature. You're not guaranteed the same amount of product year after year after year. So if there's a bad fishing year, well, what do? Because Hanseatic merchants, what they bring you is mainly grains like rye, for instance, and you need that grain to feed to live. So if you don't have enough product, how are you going to survive? Well, the Hanseatic merchant said, all right, we'll give you the grain you need to survive, but then you're in debt to us.
You mentioned merchants. In the board game Hansa Teutonica, there's a
Hmm.
distinction between what is called merchants and traders. Wondered
Hmm.
if that resonates at all with you.
Yes, I would say that makes sense because I would say the distinction being often what I would refer to as the merchant, at least in relation to Bergen, would be the person who owns the business, who actually owns the physical house, the business. So he's sort of at the top of the hierarchy, it's his business. But most of the time in Bergen, the merchants were not the ones actually living in the city of Bergen running their own business. They owned it, yes, they earned money from it, but they had other people who were sort of on an outpost here for a set amount of years working the business on their behalf.
Another element of the board game is
Hmm.
that there's something called privilege, where you have to try and earn privilege. And
Hmm.
part of the game is trying to, just gain privilege, which then gives you access into
Hmm.
certain towns.
So we know, for instance, in Norway, with relation to Bergen, since they were bringing us grains, which was a product that we really depended on, we could not produce enough grains for ourselves. Without that grain, people would starve. That gives them a very big bargaining chip when it comes to asking for privileges. Because if the king, who in late 1200s, 1300s was seated in Bergen, for instance, if he says, I don't want to give you that privilege, they can very easily say, well, if you don't need the grains, I guess just take it somewhere else, right? So they could easily put down an embargo, and we would feel that pressure very quickly.
Yeah, I read somewhere that one privilege they got was freedom from arrest as well.
Yeah, which is a very nice privilege. You can
Yeah.
pretty much do anything then. If he
um,
wants to.
well, perhaps sometime you might end up playing a game of Hansa Teutonica.
Yeah. Is a part two to this video? Should we play a game? I
I
can
would
do.
I would love to do that. So yeah, let's make that happen. Let's make part two in the future. That would be really
I
good
have to
fun.
practice first. Make sure I win.
Pardon?
I have to practice first, though. Make sure I win to start the museum. So I feel like I have to do a good job. It's a little embarrassing if not.
Yeah.
But is it
Sorry.
also like only online or is it an actual board game?
Oh, yes, it's an actual board game, and it's just recently released a new, like all of the maps in one box. And
Oh,
yeah, certainly I learned to play it on the table many times, and it was only during this pandemic that I ended up discovering it online.
yeah. Because suddenly you need a little more distance between players.
Yes. Well, Hilda, thank you so much for making this video. And just a big thank you to the Hansa Museum in Bergen for cooperating with this. So yeah, just thank you so much, and I hope to play a game of Hansa Teutonica with you sometime soon.
And actually, I would want to say to everybody who watches this when the world goes back more to normal that please come see us in Bergen. Our museum is great, if I may say so myself. I might be there to give you a tour, who knows. But anyway, Bergen is a beautiful city. It's the only place where you can see Hanseatic buildings just like this made out of wood. So it really is worth the trip, and you're all more than welcome to come and have this experience in our city.